The tools for achieving your wellness goals are right outside your door. You just have to know where to look, and I'm here to help. I'm Missy, an East Texas Christian herbalist, here to share conversations about local plants, where to find them and what to do with them, local vendors, the area's top sources for natural health products, and local practitioners, the professionals you can trust to get to the root of whatever you face. Whether you're here to learn, connect, or live more in step with the land, you're in the right place. Welcome. Oh my goodness. Have you had that thing that's going around that leaves you with a cough that just won't quit? Today we're going to talk about the possible reasons your cough might be hanging on, different types of coughs, and the herbs traditionally used to support the respiratory system when coughing is present. A week or so ago, I had an infection that started with a sore throat, and then I had one day of fever, and then it all went away. It was not really a huge deal, but the cough settled into my chest, and it's like as soon as the sun goes down, the spasmodic, non-stop, super annoying cough kicked in. It drove me nuts, and I'm sure it drove my husband nuts because neither one of us could rest. This cold and flu season, people are reporting coughs that depend on the illness that triggers them. With influenza A, the result is more often a dry cough that doesn't bring up mucus. That's what's called an unproductive cough. The infection itself might have had symptoms like fever and body aches. In contrast, the common cold usually comes with a wet cough, one that goes along with a lot of sticky mucus that might come up or stay thick in the throat where you're constantly trying to clear it. Either way, it's annoying at best, and it can really mess up your life if it keeps you from sleeping or doing the other things that you need to do. So a cough is a reflex. It's either on or off. Nerves sense something irritating in your airways, and that can be like a particle you inhaled, dust or an allergen, or with infection, that the irritant can be mucus. Nerves shoot a signal to the part of the brain that triggers coughing, and then several parts of the body all fire at the same time. Muscles contract to cause inhalation, the vocal cords take in air, and for a split second, everything contracts so pressure builds, and then all that air and pressure is forcefully expelled. It's like the body is trying to push out the irritant. The force is to clear the irritant. And at the same time, while all that's going on with the air, tiny little hairs in the lungs, your cilia, are constantly waving like tiny broom bristles, sweeping germs and debris out of the lungs and up the throat, moving almost like an escalator, moving stuff out of the throat moving it up the throat so that you'll swallow it back down into the stomach so stomach acid can destroy it. If your cough clears the irritant, fine, it's done, you're over. So what happens to cause a cough that goes on and on and on and on? It could be a number of things. Sometimes that on-off switch that is the cough reflex gets stuck. Viral infections like cold and flu can cause inflammation in the airways, and that inflammation feels like irritation because, well, it is. So you get those same nerve signals you might with an irritant saying, hey brain, something's wrong here, get rid of it. And that kicks off a cough. But that can be a bit of a problem because there's not mucus or dust or whatever to remove, and repeated intense coughing can sometimes cause even more irritation. So airway inflammation is one problem, and that's where, in terms of herbs, I'm already starting to think, what herbal allies do I know of that can soothe irritated airways? We're going to get there. Postnasal drip can be another reason coughs hang on. Cold and flu, sinus infections, allergies, weather changes, even some medications can cause excess mucus to be like a dripping faucet. It just kind of dribbles down your throat around the clock, and when you breathe, a little bit of that moisture gets into your airways. You might feel a constant throat tickle, or maybe you clear your throat a lot. Sometimes it can even make you nauseous. So when I hear postnasal drip is going on, I start to think of herbs that constrict tissue, that tighten it, astringent herbs that might help the body dry up excess mucus. And while we've talked about a constant cough after being sick, sometimes the cause isn't the infection itself that you just experienced. It's something else that your body is exposed to. You're just more sensitive to it because you're still recovering from that infection, and the environmental irritant is impacting your already vulnerable respiratory system.
Smoke and dust and chemicals and pet dander, even some medications can cause ongoing irritation. Now, don't stop medication without talking to your doctor, but if you can identify what's causing irritation and safely remove it, that might give your body the support that it needs to go on and heal. And this is where I think of mucilaginous herbs. They're traditionally looked to for soothing irritation and cooling inflammation. And here's, in terms of cough causes, this is probably the least fun thing to talk about because we all would really rather just take something and get better. But when I hear someone say that they have thick mucus in their throat and it's been there a long time, I have to ask about food sensitivities. Sometimes the body is producing mucus on a regular basis because the irritant is something like milk or eggs or gluten or nuts or soy or shellfish. And people, they tell me, I just don't want to give up cheese or I just don't want to give up bread. I feel that. And that's something that everyone has to answer on an individual basis. What's it worth to you? It's just that the possibility does exist, and it may be what's causing your issue, so sometimes you have to decide what's worse, my symptoms or giving up this food. And it may be that if you identify what you're sensitive to, you can find acceptable substitutes, and you might also find that when you make that change, you didn't even realize all of the ways your life was affected until you start feeling so much better. So food sensitivities can be another reason for a cough that just doesn't go away. Okay, so we talked about several reasons for a cough that won't go away. Let's go to the herbs. First of all, let's look at that cough with a lot of mucus. An herb that comes up for a lot of types of cough is mullein, Verbascum thapsus. It's popular and it's highly sought after on local foraging forums, and it grows wild throughout much of the U.S. It has these big fuzzy leaves. My grandson likes to carry them around because they're so fluffy. They're almost like petting a stuffed animal. Herbalists reference the hairs in conjunction with the doctrine of signatures, and the doctrine of signatures is the belief that a plant's appearance or its features or shape resembles the person or ailment that it's meant to treat. I always think it's like God saying, hey, think about this when you have that. Like, for example, walnuts look like little brains and have been studied in conjunction to neurological health. Well, the little hairs on mullein leaves have been connected to the cilia, the little hairs in the lungs. 2,000 years ago, Greek physician Dioscorides described mullein as a treatment for old coughs, referencing its soothing and healing and relaxing properties. Old coughs. I grow mullein. I use it as a tea sometimes, but more frequently as a tincture. A tincture is a type of plant extract. I see mullein growing in open fields and on roadsides, and although it's not a good idea to harvest from roadsides because plants there are exposed to all kinds of toxins that you don't want in something that you're hoping will make you feel better, if you want to try mullein for yourself and you're in East Texas, I've seen it at Lone Star Botanicals as loose leaf. I'm positive they carry it at the Granary, probably other places too. If you don't live in the area and you're shopping online, Mountain Rose Herbs is a good source for buying it, both as a loose herb or as an extract. Another herb that's been used practically forever for respiratory support is elecampane. I grow this one too. It's not native to our area, but it grows pretty well here. Elecampane is more of a gradual tonic, often looked to when the lungs have become weakened and strained over time. And so you can imagine how that might be of interest when someone has been coughing and coughing and coughing and they're just so tired of it. And I should say, with a lot of herbs traditionally used for cough, when you first start using them, you might see a temporary increase in coughing, but don't give up. That's a sign of change, and change is what you want. You're empowering your body to do a little more than it was able to before. Sometimes a wet cough that just keeps on keeping on persists because mucus is still being produced. It's still getting added to the system. So let's talk about that unproductive cough, the one that maybe is more about airway inflammation and constant spasming. When part of that is a runny nose or postnasal drip, or sometimes even when there's a stuffy nose, I think one of my favorite herbs is goldenrod. This one grows in East Texas too. It grows in most of the U.S. and you see it everywhere in the early fall. It has big yellow flowers that make me think of fireworks. It looks like this just yellow thing shooting up going, poof. It's just beautiful. People think goldenrod causes allergies, but actually in many cases, it's an ally against them, but that's a whole other conversation. I'm bringing goldenrod up now because it has such reliable astringent actions. If you remember, we said earlier, astringent herbs tighten tissue. And if you picture the inside of your nasal passages, and at first they're running and dripping and just constantly draining, but you tighten that tissue, all of a sudden, tissues become less permeable. They leak less, blood vessels constrict, and excess fluid gets basically cut off. Goldenrod also has anti-inflammatory actions, so that irritation that's prompting the drainage and prompting the coughing also gets addressed. If you're not following this show yet, here's a reason you should go ahead and do it now. I wildcraft throughout the year, and I'm going to be talking about it here. So if you're new to herbalism and you want to get into wildcrafting and foraging, it can be overwhelming at the beginning to figure out how do you do it? And it might help to know when it's time to actually go out and look for things. For example, in spring, when I start seeing elderflower, I'm going to say, hey, go look at that big bridge on Lake Palestine, and you'll see a big clump of elderflower. And that way you can go and put your eyeballs on it and see what it looks like and go hunting for your own in a place that's safe to harvest from. I'll also talk at that point about how I harvest and process it so that you have timely information when it's time to actually do it on what's in season for our part of Texas. And if you're not in East Texas, let's say you're in western Louisiana or southern Arkansas or Oklahoma or closer to Austin or Houston, there's going to be a lot of overlap. You may just be a few weeks earlier or later depending on your location, and that's something that can be figured out. Now, getting back to goldenrod, I love goldenrod. I gather it when the buds are just starting to open, and I dry the flower and a little bit of the leaf in a cool place. And then I strip everything off the stem, and I put it in a big mason jar to use as needed. And man, every time I take the lid off that jar, I smell it, and the fragrance is so incredible. It's like, something deep inside me says that's good. Goldenrod's amazing. I told you I was sick lately and got that annoying, persistent cough myself. Unfortunately, a lot of the herbs that usually work didn't. That happens, and it doesn't mean that the herbs don't work in general. It just means that they weren't the right ones in this situation and this body. What I did end up with is probably one of the worst tasting herbs I know. So I kind of have to be desperate before I'll reach for it. I try all of the other ones first, but a persistent cough will make you desperate. I'm talking about horehound. It's been regarded as a lung tonic. Herbalists turned to it for opening up the chest and penetrating deep. In the late 1800s, people made horehound candy with it, I guess to get people to take it, although to me it's so gross. I can't imagine any amount of sugar making it better. It's also believed to be one of the bitter herbs mentioned in the Bible to be eaten during Passover, and bitter it definitely has. As bad as it tastes, for me, the action is almost immediate in terms of cough, and for me, it seems like it kind of gets better as time goes by. People took horehound for cough for much of recorded history, and the candy was actually marketed for cough until the late 1980s when the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, ordered makers to stop telling people that horehound cleared breathing passages. They made a list of 20 traditional ingredients like horehound and eucalyptus oil and camphor that had been advertised for respiratory issues previously, and at that point the FDA said that they were no longer approved as effective. They said that only guaifenesin met the requirements to be called a safe and effective expectorant. I don't know if they used that exact phrasing, safe and effective, back then, but it's what I see now. So there's that. If you've tried horehound for cough, I'd really be curious to hear what you think. Other herbs that come to mind when someone describes a cough that's wet and productive include thyme for softening and loosening, licorice root as a general soothing tonic, and anise seed for its calming action. Now, what about a non-productive cough? When there's that dry, tight, hacking spasm, but that's about all. I picture a mud puddle that sits in the sun for several days until all the water evaporates and just the dry, crusty crud is left behind, and that's not a perfect analogy, but it's how I picture lungs when there's a non-productive cough and that feeling of dryness. The gunk is stuck. It's almost like baked on, and it's either too thick or too dried out for the body to expel it. Anise seed, like I mentioned earlier, has a reputation for thinning mucus, so I might bring it in sometimes. But I'm almost always going to think of marshmallow root, Althea officinalis. Marshmallow has mucilage, a gel-like substance plants secrete to retain water, protect against stress, and improve nutrient absorption. Mucilage can coat the throat to soothe that tickle and cut down on the friction when you do cough. It also cools inflammation and puts a little bit of a protective barrier in place for that irritated tissue. The National Library of Medicine published 2 surveys in which pharmacies asked participants to track dry cough symptoms over the course of 7 days after the consumer bought either lozenges or syrup containing marshmallow root extract. In consumer-reported outcomes, this is a quote, both preparations, the lozenge and the syrup, showed a good effect with respect to the symptomatic treatment of oral or pharyngeal irritation and associated dry cough, with a very rapid onset of effects in the majority of cases within 10 minutes. Oh, I like a rapid onset when you're coughing. Again, if you're in East Texas, Lone Star Botanicals on 155, they carry marshmallow root. The Old Apothecary also has a booth inside the Painted Tree, and I think most of her packages, in January of 2016 anyway, are $5 for an ounce. So that's nice when you just want a personal-sized amount of something. Okay, this is getting long, so I'm going to try to wrap it up. But one more herb that can be a game changer is lobelia. This one's a low-dose botanical. Too much can make you throw up, so you want to start slow. But you don't need a lot. It's kind of shocking how little it takes to make a difference. I grew lobelia last year for the first time, and I like to see what my plants taste like. This is a story, what not to do. And I'll often grab a leaf and just put it in my mouth and chew it while I'm working, and I'd never done that with lobelia. Well, I tried that with one single little lobelia leaf, and I couldn't believe how it went to my stomach. I was sitting very quietly for about 20 minutes, not sure if I wanted to throw up or just go on to heaven. But I don't tell you that to scare you off. I just want to be clear about easing into it. More is not better with this one. The taste is acrid, but almost immediately. With lobelia, for me, there's this sensation of relaxation that starts kind of in the middle of my sternum and just rolls out to my shoulders, and suddenly I can breathe easier. And somehow it takes that itchy, tight feeling and just sort of soothes and opens and relaxes. It's really, really wonderful. And it can allow someone just enough space to fall asleep. But let's say you don't have any of those things I just talked about on hand. You don't have lobelia or marshmallow root or mullein or any of that, weird herbal stuff. And you're just coughing up a storm. It's late, all the stores are closed, you're miserable. You can probably still use herbs though. Go to your pantry and look for sage or thyme or rosemary, any of those green savory herbs you put on meat to make it easier to break down in your digestive system. Most of those are also antimicrobial and supportive for the respiratory system. So once you find what you're going to use, get out a pot with a lid. Oh, oregano is another good one. Get out a pot with a lid and put in a little water, maybe just a cup or 2, and heat it up on the stove until it's boiling. At that point, turn off the heat, toss in your herb, a tablespoon if you measure, or just enough to fit in the hollow of your hand if you guesstimate when you're sick like me. Then toss in your herb and put the lid on right away, and leave it there with the heat off while you go to the bathroom and get your towel. So come back. The heat stays off from here on. Set your stove timer for 5 minutes and put the towel over your head to make a little tent, and bend over your pot or pull it close to you and remove the lid so that the steam comes out inside your towel tent. So vent if you have to. Don't get too close to the steam. You don't have to melt your face for it to work, but just hang out there until your timer goes off. Relax and inhale the steam, and often that can be such a big help. And the steam itself is also soothing in addition to the herbs. Okay, if you're coughing, that's a lot of things you can try. If you get stuck and you want to talk to an herbalist, I offer acute care consultations in person or online, where we can talk about your specific symptoms and what herbs are traditionally used with them. And an herbal preparation is included with the consultation. You can find out more at gracerootedherbalist.com. That's all for today. Talk more soon.